Vanity Fair. Know all persons present and to come that the Southwold Town Council, as successors of the Mayor, Aldermen and Burgesses of the former Borough of Southwold, in virtue of the several powers, rights and privileges given, granted and confirmed by divers charters or letters patent of former kings and queens of England, to their...
The Suffolk town of Southwold lies on the edge of the North Sea. It's a bright, breezy little town of narrow streets, someone once wrote, of old cottages and pleasant greens. It is indeed a delightful and dignified seaside town. Southwold is almost an island. The sea on the eastern side, marshes that lead to the tidal River Bly on the southwest, and Buss Creek that surrounds the rest of it. The only way in is across Mite's Bridge. Southwold is an ancient town and was once a borough, which meant it ruled itself until the early 1970s. It had a mayor, 4 aldermen, 12 councillors, and a sturdy town hall. With the changes in local government, some of Southwold's independence has gone, and a scene such as this in 1927, when all the officers of local government assembled in the marketplace, will never be seen again. The purpose of all this was the presentation of the freedom of the borough to a fisherman, Henry Smith, for a particularly brave deed when he jumped over the side of his boat, fully clothed, to rescue a colleague from drowning. Another custom that the town officials periodically exercised was the beating of the bounds. Equipped with willow canes, the party would proceed to the extreme points of the borough boundaries, where a small boy was duly beaten so that he'd forever remember the limits of his native town. They no longer beat a boy, but hit the boundary marks instead. The last beating of the bound ceremony took place in 1973. Today the town is governed by a far-off district council. All that remains is the equivalent of a parish council presided over by a chairman. But the charm of Southwold remains. It has many good shops, hotels and fine buildings which have resisted change. It's also endowed with a magnificent 15th century church. Another of Southwold's assets is the large common. For 8 years preceding the Second World War, on August bank holidays, the Duke of York, later King George VI, presided over a boys' camp here. Mr. Barrett Jenkins, local historian, remembers.
1931 was the first camp, and the last visit was in 1938. And the king would go on the beach and bathe with the boys there. And in 1936, August the 5th, he planted the tree at the entrance to the common, York Road. In 1937, when the king visited the camp, he presented the town council with a gardening book because the tree which was planted last year had gone. It had been eaten by a horse.
The long sand and shingle beach is ideal for holidaymakers. Southwold was known as a bathing place as far back as 1840, and in Edwardian days, bathing machines were a familiar sight. The pier, originally considerably longer than it is today, was opened in 1900, and the Beryl steamers called here on their daily excursions from London to Yarmouth, calling at such places as Felixstowe and Walton-on-the-Naze. A return fare to Felixstowe was 3 shillings, to Walton 4 shillings, or you could go to London and back for 9 shillings and 6pence. In those days the beach was a busy place. There were fishing boats, old salts, and a curious collection of tarred wooden huts. Fishing in those days went on practically all the year round. Wally Upcraft, harbour master and fisherman, remembers.
Some of them would work a small boat on the beach during the winter months, called a draw net, after small cod one. They would then have herring nets. What herring they got, they would cut up and put onto the hooks, lining for rooker, or you might call them skate. There would be the spring herring fishing, there would be what they call the midsummer herring fishing. Then they would start the trawling. They'd be trawling up till about the end of September, and they'd start after the autumn herring, what they used to call the longshores. Towards the end of October, somebody put a few sprat nets in, as soon as they start getting a few sprats, and then that would be spratting. If the sprats either fell off or they were cheap, start line fishing again for cod.
The boats were drawn up the beach by capstan, and one of these is still in use on the almost deserted shore. Herring boats worked out of Southwold harbour. For centuries, East Anglian fishermen have followed the herring. At one time, great square-rigged craft known as busses were used, and that's where Buss Creek got its name. And the harbour inn was originally named the Fishing Buss. Today, only a handful of professional fishermen work out of the harbour. Southwold's harbour entrance has always suffered from silting, and with an ebbing tide and an easterly gale, entering it can be a hazardous business. There have been many attempts to improve the harbour. In the 1960s, a small vessel about to be used as a dredger found difficulty in manoeuvring in the harbour before she could even start work. The idea was to increase trade by making the harbour more attractive to coasters, but it was unsuccessful, just as a much bigger scheme had been in 1906. There's been some form of ferry working across the river here to Walberswick for over 700 years. The old ferry, hauled across the harbour on chains laid from bank to bank, was fitted with a steam engine in the latter part of Queen Victoria's long reign. Then, in the late 1920s, the paddle tug Pendennis towed away this ferry, and a new one named Bligh took over. In 1931, she crossed the river 26,000 times and kept up her short voyaging until 1942, when she ceased running altogether. At Blackshaw, as this part of the river is known, is kept the fast Atlantic-class inshore lifeboat. Southwold has a long history of lifeboat work, going back to 1841, when the first boat was kept on the beach. Ships in trouble and wrecks were common in the 19th century in Sole Bay, as the stretch of water off Southwold is known. In 1908, after the harbour had been improved, the sailing lifeboat was transferred there for easier and quicker launching. Southwold received a motor lifeboat, the Mary Scott, in 1925. Although she had a powerful petrol engine, she was fitted with sails, as were many of these early motor lifeboats. One of her many achievements was the rescue of the four-man crew of the low-stock smack Evola on January the 9th, 1934. There was no shortage of men for the lifeboats when plenty of fishermen worked their boats from the beach. Their medals are evidence of their excellent work. Each summer on Trinity Sunday, South Green is invaded by showmen setting up Trinity Fair. In the old days, the fair arrived in one long cavalcade, travelling up the High Street and onto the Green. Town charter, issued in the reign of Henry VII, allowed for a 3-day fair to be held in Southwold, commencing on Trinity Monday. At 12 noon on the Monday, the Mayor and Corporation in full regalia officially opened the fair, the town clerk reading the proclamation. After this formal opening, the Mayor and his party had the first ride. The old corporation has gone, but even a parish council can continue a tradition and enjoy all the fun of the Trinity Fair. Southwold once had a railway, and a famous railway at that. A narrow gauge line, only 3 foot, it ran on light metals nearly 9 miles to Halesworth, where there was a small station beside the main Great Eastern Line. Nothing now remains except the odd decayed sleeper, and the station site at Halesworth is overgrown. The line ran through delightful countryside, with stations at Wenniston, Blyborough and Walmerswick. The Southwold Railway was a friendly line. Trains waited for regular passengers if they overslept, and this sort of thing gave rise to some jokes about the railway. You could buy comic postcards portraying passengers picking flowers and porters on the lookout for the missing train. The railway opened in 1879 and lasted almost 50 years, closing in April 1929, killed by the competition of the newfangled motor bus. And when closure was announced, one of the old silent film companies immortalized the railway with this affectionate tribute.